do our order on our agenda a little bit different. Grant said she was kind of interested in one of our items, and so I think we're going to move it up anyway. But are you ready for us to start with the
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I think we're going to move the order a little bit and do our Midtown Express update first. As some of you mentioned, the public hearing was on Thursday, and so our staff has been working with TxDOT and Southgate, trying to make sure we understood the impact to our Euless businesses. So what Mr. Barker is going to do is just walk you through the corridor and try to, we have a 10-day comment period as any citizen that would like to make comments does. And so the city has intention of submitting a letter to TxDOT about our concerns. And so what we're going to do tonight is highlight to you what those concerns are and what our comments will be, and make sure those comments reflect the opinions of the city council. So if you hear something here that you disagree with, we'd like you to let us know because those comments will need to be submitted by the staff within that 10-day comment period. So make sure and let us know if you disagree with something that you're hearing regarding that. Mr. Barker, and I have allotted Mr. Barker about 45 minutes so we can see if he can stay on schedule. This is a pretty lengthy conversation. If we finish early tonight, then I'm going to have to reevaluate the schedule.
Before we go to the pretty pictures, which actually with the schematic that we're going to look at to do this is the same schematic that was shown at the public meeting. So if you were at the public meeting, you've already seen that we're now able to show that. The city's comments can be kind of boiled down to 3 general buckets, if you will. And so keep that in mind as we're going through this. The first bucket is something that TxDOT is showing, a driveway access to a piece of property that TxDOT is showing to be closed, that the city is asking to be left open, basically to remain as is. What you're going to find in this drawing is the original schematic was done before this project was ever put out to bid. And so in-house, they determined which driveways could remain and which could close based on how they thought the corridor would look. Since that time, TxDOT put the project out, the CDAs submitted their bids, Southgate Constructors was selected, and the very first thing Southgate did was to go back in and to try to re-engineer or see how they could do the scope of the project more efficiently. So the drawings that you see at the meetings reflect Southgate's plan to deliver what TxDOT put out to bid. Because of that, in general, Southgate, much like NTE, was able to provide what they needed to within the same environmentally cleared corridor, but really on a smaller footprint. So what you're going to find is that in general, the properties in Euless are affected less than was previously thought, or actually not even thought, was previously disclosed at the first round of public meetings a year ago. Because of that, you're going to see on some driveways a label called CDP, which is a denial of access. And when you see that, I'm going to address the ones that are still, I guess, valid. Many of them are no longer valid because what you're seeing on this schematic is an overlay of a previous iteration in which those were denied. So we'll talk about those. So again, the first bucket is what TxDOT is currently showing to be closed. And when I say TxDOT, it's TxDOT kind of interchangeably here. And the city is asking them to leave open literally as they remain, or maybe with a slight, alignment issue. The second bucket that we're talking about that our comments fall into is the city asking TxDOT to modify access from what is shown on this. So we've looked at it and said we think there might be a better way to do this. That could be either open, closed, or just a completely different way to make you look at it. To me, this is the bucket where, because we have the local knowledge and work with local property owners, we may have a little bit better idea of something that might work as opposed to somebody sitting in an office somewhere drawing schematic plans. And then the third bucket is areas where the city is asking TxDOT to go back and reevaluate the appropriateness of what they're showing to do. And what we really mean by appropriateness is the safety of that particular piece. So it's not that we're necessarily asking them to close or open or whatever. We're just saying this looks a little interesting. We'd like you to relook at that. So all of our comments as we go through the parcels are going to fall into generally those 3 pieces. Adam, can you go to the schematic for me, please, sir? So we are going to start, and actually, Adam, go back to the west for me, get me to 157 so we can start at 157. We're actually, that's the second route. Go to the first schematic. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start here, and I brought my trusty pointer, which is actually a golf club that Jim Moy gave me a few years ago. He said it'd put some pop into my drive. But it's going to work as a pointer today. We are at 157 and State Highway 183. This is First Baptist Church in Euless. So just to orient you here, parcel 22 is Taco Cabana. Parcel 677 is the cool zone, and that's where we're going to start there at the cool zone. Currently, the cool zone has 4 driveways, one in this location, one here, and one a little bit further down, 157. Where you see the blue line is where right-of-way is going to be acquired from that property. As such, TxDOT's proposing to eliminate the driveway here right at the intersection, which we would agree with, it's an unsafe driveway. And they'll also eliminate the driveway here closest to the intersection. But where you see the control denial point access, that is their only remaining access to the State Highway 183 frontage road. Again, Southgate will tell you that they inherited that control denial point from the previous iterations. And so what the city's comment here is we're asking them to look at that, and that falls into that, what we call that yellow bucket, which is they're technically showing that to be closed, and we're asking them to reevaluate that and leave that open. The obvious reason is want that property owner to have access to the freeway frontage road. He currently has 4 driveways. We think the way this will play out is, again, we'll make our comment there. And then this driveway down here falls outside of the project. And so what they're telling us is that will be back to local control. So there will be no reason for this driveway to be eliminated. So this property owner in that scenario would still have 2 driveways, one on 157 and one on this freeway service road. 22 Taco Cabana, they've got their access here off of 157, but you can see this key access to them off of the service road is marked to go away. We have visited with Southgate about the fact that those folks worked with the Tarrant County Office of TxDOT when they built that property here recently to basically allow for the freeway construction. You will see that they're taking a little bit of right-of-way, but the right-of-way was planned to be taken, so it doesn't affect their parking calculation or their site circulation. Obviously, closing this driveway would be very, very detrimental to them. So again, here the city's comment is going to be to reevaluate leaving that driveway open and allowing the site to circulate. And in that case, we'll probably be providing the documentation that the city has where Taco Cabana worked with the Tarrant County TxDOT office to pre-plan that. And basically say, they just did what you told them to do, we'd like you to leave it alone. If you move here just a little further, and I'll try to go through these pretty quick, I want to point out this very first one here at Denny's. You'll see the CBP again, but it's not where it affects a blue line, and that is because it's a leftover from previous iterations. So there is no issue here. That driveway will be left open. The driveway here that serves Starbucks as well as Home Depot will be left open. And I'm going to slide this thing down just a little bit. And start back up here at the former La Quinta, which is now the Motel 6. That driveway access would be left open. Lot 28 is going to be the next city comment. This is the Microtel. They have 2 driveway access points onto the service road. This driveway access point will remain. This driveway access point falls into that category where we're asking them to evaluate the appropriateness. And the reason for that is the shifting of the on-ramp is such that this driveway, we're pretty sure people will try to actually cut across and hit the on-ramp, and that will not be a safe situation. So that has slid to the east, causing that issue. This property, because there's a fire lane fully circulating it, can be served by a single driveway, and again, it remains their freeway frontage road access as they've always had. So we're just asking them to reevaluate the appropriateness, and again, when we say that, what we're really meaning is safety of that driveway access right there. There's really not much other effects there south until we get a little bit closer to the corner of the frontage road and Ector Drive. So let me scoot down there. first thing we run into here is on 42A, which is the Domino's and the Radio Shack building. There is a driveway currently in this location and then here on Ector Drive. This driveway is extraordinarily close to the intersection, but also to, is that Ridgecrest Drive right there. And so they show that driveway to be denied, and we're asking them to reiterate that and look at that. I think that is one where we're asking them to evaluate the appropriateness of it, but this property, if you see the blue line again, will have that is right-of-way taking that they'll go through with the property owner, and that will really, really affect that property. It does not actually touch their building, but what it does is it takes away their parking, and they will not be able to park that building for city regulations. In addition, it makes the building too close to the front and side yard setbacks. And so Southgate will tell you, and there's a little bit of different category, that it may end up having the effect of a full taking on that piece of property. And so really what we'd like to do there, if that's the case, is work with the property owner to reevaluate what's the best way to access that property. 42B has a driveway which actually will be allowed to remain, but there may be some sort of chance that you could combine these two driveways. There may be a way, it's just going to be very, very difficult. If you're familiar with that area, that driveway is so close to the intersection. Just for point of reference, the design standard that TxDOT uses is that you cannot have a driveway within 350 feet of the intersection. 350 feet from this intersection is considerably back in this area, so it is well under the 350 feet. That same criteria they do not apply to existing city streets, so there's no reason that we would suspect any issue with Ridgecrest Drive. It starts to get real interesting as you move across Ector Drive. The first thing that you'll see is the design calls for a median nose here. So that has some effects on this property 44A and 44B. When these two hotels were built here a few years ago, they have a mutual access driveway that comes out to Ector Drive and actually provides access to both of them. They have an agreement with 44B, and you go by and they may have some cars parked there. But you will no longer have the ability to propose to turn south on Ector Drive and turn into that mutual access to go to the hotels. So we are going to make the comment that we would like them to reevaluate the length of this median nose and consider pulling that back to a point that you would have access to the mutual access drive. You're not going to get access to their existing driveways. It's simply too close to the freeway. But if you were to give them access to this mutual access drive, then there's some things you could do to serve both of those property. And again, that drive already serves the Best Western Plus in the La Quinta. 44A is one of the most probably heavily affected properties, and it's really kind of interesting. If you can see in the blue right-of-way line, it will not touch their canopy. However, it will touch their tanks. And so the underground storage tanks for the fuel. And so in general, the thought there is that property would be completely damaged out, cannot exist as a fuel center going forward. In addition, they currently have a driveway here off Ector, which the city would propose to remain. But you can see what they've drawn in here, which is a little bit, this is their driveway now, and this area is just kind of a wide area of pavement if you go out there now. But you can actually exit now and hit the frontage road and continue on the frontage road. As part of what Southgate's doing, this frontage road actually gets tucked in a little bit closer to the main lanes. And there is a dedicated U-turn here. And so what Southgate has drawn in the design is no longer giving 44 access to the freeway frontage road, making a hard right turn onto Huffman Drive. The issue with that becomes a couple of things. Anybody turning here or making these movements is going to be looking at potentially a car or headlights right here. It's going to look like there's a conflicting move getting ready to happen. And at the end of the day, you'd only be separated by a curb right here. So we start to wonder about how safe this is, and even if, you know, potentially what that distance ends up being, if that's going to be two back-to-back curves, could a vehicle with a long nose actually, you know, be reaching over into a different lane, even though they were physically traveling in their lane? So we've spent some time, and I'm going to scoot down just a little bit further. the city staff has spent some time trying to evaluate the totality of, I would say, 44A, 45, which again is the vacant lot now, 47, and kind of this 48, 49. And it also relates into what we're going to talk about here a little bit in a minute on this vacant property up here next to Carl Auto Care. So, one of the things that we've looked at and that the staff would like to make a recommendation is, because this building is going to be completely damaged out, when you start to look at what that does to building setbacks for future construction on something else coming in there, you start to really get pinched on this side. It's hard to tell here, but there, you can see this drainage coming there and taking that is a open drainage ditch, which you could cover and build flat work parking over, but you cannot build a building. What you start to look at is that there are some things that may have to happen here. This is either going to have to be a significantly smaller structure, a different use. Potentially, the owner of this property could combine it with the vacant property here, or the owner of this vacant property could buy that property. There's some things that could happen where you could meld two properties into one more developable lot. We think, as we talked about earlier, that there needs to be some access from here onto that property to allow for somebody to even access that from the freeway frontage road. So as we boil all that together and start looking at how Huffman Drive, and this is Vine Street, and this is actually called Roy Drive. It's a leftover piece from before the freeway was built. Its distances from Huffman to the freeway frontage road. That is it. The school's up on this side, and so Roy Drive no longer exists there. And then you've got the self-storage building here. So when you start to look at how all that functions together, what the staff has looked at is making a comment that right here where the hand is, and that's the access point to the two hotels, that would be extended to the freeway frontage road. And what that does is give both hotels direct access from the freeway frontage road, anybody looking to go to those hotels. That this driveway coming out of this property, which again will be heavily damaged, would simply be eliminated. And that access to this property would come from the mutual access drive, and what we believe the greatest potential is again, for these properties to be combined. The driveway that comes in to service these two hotels is already constructed and platted as mutual access to lot 45. So that one driveway serves the properties here. What that would also allow you to do is Vine Street, per their plan, and they don't show it here, would be reconstructed back about to this point. So Vine Street would continue to go all the way out to the frontage road as it does today. That gives Republic Tire and those guys down in that area the same access that they have. It gives Kerry here at the insurance office his same access, doesn't change anything. What that would potentially do is, if you extend this driveway out, was it would allow the city, if they wanted to get rid of this portion of Huffman and in essence create a new front door, if you will, to that hotel property, which when you kind of step back and look at it, we're just trying to say what point does that serve. So imagine this driveway coming all the way out. You still have Vine Street. Vine Street is your circulation here, and again for these businesses. This piece circulates nicely all the way out to the freeway frontage road. This purple piece represents the existing skywalk to the junior high. That is going away, and so that is no longer going to be there. And the other part of this would be the potentiality of us abandoning the right-of-way of Roy Drive, and it would be, again, this is just potential, could be combined with this vacant tract here, because you start to see a picture where all this would be added to the vacant tract. I kind of have to scoot over to tell you a little bit more of this story. You may remember that in early iterations, the right-of-way line cut through Whataburger much more severely, cut through Taco Cabana, cut through Paro Auto Care, and actually came down, well, not quite that far, came down about like this. What it did is it cut all this vacant property in half and did not leave you a developable lot on either side. It left TxDOT right away on one side and too small of a lot to be developed on the other side. The staff worked with Southgate when they did their realignment. And because Southgate took this in a little further, and because we asked them to relook at Byers, what they were doing at Byers in the original design was, I don't know if you're familiar with the MidtownExpress project up by the Church of Christ in North Richland Hills. There's kind of what I call a canyon looking up that. It's got these huge retaining walls that you're just trying to access their parking lot. That's what they had designed here. And none of these properties would have had access to buyers until you got almost back here to the Huffman Drive area. So we had them relook at that and do some things, and what they were able to do was maintain buyers as they currently exist at the current grade and just tie back in to the street. And so these driveways are accessible now. No longer taking out these businesses in this land. So this whole area here becomes future potential developable at some point in time. Para Auto Care is now unaffected and gets to say, so again, one of our comments here is that we'd like to see that driveway remain. This gets into kind of why you have these, it was shown as denial of access because back when these properties were being totally taken out, there was no access needed. So we would ask for these two to remain. What we are asking for in this piece, which is this 50 PT 1, 2, 3, 4, and 54, is that TxDOT would agree to work with the city at a future date to allow new driveway permits to that property, and the city would commit to, in essence, master planning that so that you don't have multiple driveways. That you have, probably in that distance, I'm going to guess that you have 2 driveways. This is not unlike what we've done in many places in the city. 157 at the new Dairy Queen, instead of having a driveway at Dairy Queen and at each additional lot there, you've got a mutual access fire lane that's got 1 or 2 points of access. So someday when this develops out in the future, what you would probably see again, this would be gone, and you would have somewhere between Vine Street and the Parma Drive, I'm going to guess, 2 driveways with a mutual access piece that would serve all of those, all that development. The reason that's very, very speculative is because you just simply don't know what will develop there. Will that be a series of additional drive-through restaurants? Will it be a single building? So depending on how that would develop, we kind of drive that. But we're basically asking TxDOT to give us the nod that by doing these things, that this section of freeway frontage is now eligible to have additional driveways put there in the future. This is where the drawing gets a little odd because in one of our most critical points, we have the match line that moves on to the next sheet. So if you look at 58, this is Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's nothing at all going to happen to them. Whataburger will still be a complete taking. You can see the line that actually goes through the building. They will still have their access off of buyers, but the building itself will be a complete taking and be torn down. Adam, can you switch to the next sheet, and we're just going to continue on. Reposition this just a bit. Okay, so Whataburger was just off the screen here. So 59 is Long John Silver's, McDonald's, and 7-Eleven. Between 7-Eleven, McDonald's, Long John Silver's, and Whataburger, there are existing 7 driveways in that very short distance. Basically, none of them meet the criteria. So what our comment to TxDOT is, and what we've worked with them on, is, and it requires you to maybe speculate a little bit, but what we've said is, let's don't arbitrarily go in here and make driveway decisions unknowing how this will redevelop. Let's come in here, and if you saw at the public meeting, there was a note that they had put on the plan that indicated that TxDOT would work with the city and the property owners to locate mutual access driveways there in such a way as to serve all the properties. The key that we're wanting to do, we're not going to have 7 driveways back in that short distance again, but we want to optimize the driveways, but to do it in a way that you don't put any one property owner at a disadvantage or an advantage as the market kind of recreates these areas. So if you think about Whataburger, it's going away. We know, Mike has talked with the Whataburger folks, they have a desire to stay in that area. So they're going to be looking at the general area and saying, we've got this land, is there something else we could potentially purchase and reorganize and do this? We know that the word for many, many years on McDonald's has been, and of course they own land all the way back to Highway 10, that they would simply rebuild their building further to the south and shift that. So they've got 2 driveways now, both of them are right in, right out. You know, could they potentially function with one driveway that's a larger driveway in the middle and not have any ill repercussions? So the city comment there is not going to be so specific to say, we agree, we disagree, yes, no. What we're saying is let's, in my mind, let's work smarter, not harder, and agree to work with everybody in the future there and figure out what would be the best alignment for the way that that property redevelops. There's just so much unknown as to how that property will redevelop. Long John Silver's is a complete take. The line goes through the building. I think, Mike, they have indicated they're not 100% sure what they're going to do. They do not have the property behind them where they can, like McDonald's, just simply scoot back and rebuild if they want to do. Mr. Huda that owns this gas station here, his canopies are going to be a take, and his fuel tanks, I think sit right here, are going to be a take. So it is highly unlikely that he could maintain a fuel service there. It may be that there's some other business that could happen there, or maybe that has to be combined with another piece of property. So sometimes when you see highway projects, they will go through and put driveways that at the end of it you think, well, why is that there and it doesn't serve anything? What we're trying to do here again is just make the comment, and they have, I would tell you, they kind of tentatively verbally agreed with this, that it makes sense to look at how that's going to develop and redevelop and line driveways that will optimize ingress, egress to all the properties, be fair to all the property owners, and make it the safest that it can be. The next piece I want to really talk about is the First United Methodist Church here that is 69 PT1. There is a comment that the city's going to make. There had been some question about how would you access this property if you were southbound on Main Street, now that the design calls for a divided median here, that there's no way to turn in. What the city did not want is a situation where you had to come to the control intersection and turn east on Highway 10 and come down and get into here and try to make a U-turn and come all the way back to the church. It's just kind of an unsafe situation. So what TxDOT is showing is a driveway in this point, and again, it's controlled now. So what we're asking them is to reiterate that what they have verbally told us, and we'd like it in writing, that what they're telling us is they're going to put a driveway in this location that will allow southbound traffic to come to the controlled intersection on the service road and then turn into the church. Working with the pastor of the church and the building committee, there's some little tweaks to that. For instance, they're showing that in this location, it might be better served to be here so that people don't try to make some sort of a straight cut through to the freeway here. But nonetheless, somewhere in this area, we're asking them to put in writing and reiterate that that driveway would be there. TxDOT and Southgate have both told us that that one will occur because they understand that access to the church. The next question I get is kind of on these two driveways that are going to remain, but there will be some different functionality than there is today. You would not be able to turn into this driveway from southbound. You will be able to turn right out and leave. If you were heading back down Highway 10 or if you were heading back up north, then what we would perceive is that you could exit here and head north, and if you're heading down Highway 10, you would exit here and head west on Highway 10. So we think that this driveway is key to the church as far as how folks are able to get in and out of there. The other thing we've been working with the pastor of the church is that Southgate's going to come do a meeting specifically with them to talk about not only that issue, but some of their educational building here is a complete take. Y'all know about the issues with the relationship of the front of the church today to the right of way. And then the other part is that that bridge, as we reported to you previously, will be out for as much as 18 months. And so we want to have a very targeted meeting with folks.
If you wanted to go eastbound on 10, how would, because now you can come out and go across and take a left. How would you go eastbound on 10? You can't do a U-turn there, can you?
It's, let me think here,
How can
Bob,
you
that's
do a
not
U-turn?
marked as no U-turn. It's not my favorite traffic movement. What you're saying, Tim, now is you can come here and do this.
Yeah.
But you would not be able to do that because that controlled median.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
What does that mean, you have to extend so far down?
That is a comment that we could make. Here's the fear. The fear is if it doesn't extend that far down, people will do this, make this movement right here. And one side of that is that's the movement that's made today.
That's what we do today. That's what it's doing since
But
1964.
it's
or
because
whatever.
of the distance to the intersection.
I think we can make some comments there about that particularly eastbound movement on Highway 10. I mean, if you go south on Main Street, I mean, if you're through places, it's kind of a weird movement. They did. And I mean, that may be part of the, back to our time and money comment, but obviously at some point in time, when driveway access can line up with Cullen Drive, that would provide that eastbound Highway 10.
So while we're asking questions, what's the grade or the elevation of that service road right there on that drive, north side of the church? It's right now like a pretty good steep.
If memory serves me correctly, it's not significantly different than what it is today. Now, one of the things that's a little different in this schematic that's kind of hard to think about is we always talk about the interim project, and that's what they're building as part of what we know as Midtown Express today, and then the ultimate. And what the ultimate is the addition of additional managed lanes. The interim project will have one managed lane in each direction. The ultimate project ups that to 2 and even potentially 3. What you're seeing in these schematics is the ultimate, because you see these little rectangles here. That's actually elevated structure where the blue lanes are the ultimate managed lanes. The thing I like about that is, as you look through the corridor, what we're looking at is how the ultimate project will affect the corridor. And one of the things that the city has stressed with TxDOT and Southgate, and we've got them to acquiesce to, is that they are acquiring the ultimate right-of-way today, even though it may not necessarily be needed for the interim construction. And the reason for that is nobody can tell you when the ultimate will be built. I mean, it could be 3 years from now, it could be 20 years from now. And it just seemed in our mind unfair to the citizenry to come in and potentially have acquisition, et cetera, and at some point in time in the future, you would always know that you'd be subject to potentially further acquisition. So this is kind of to pull the Band-Aid off quick one time and take the right of way that you need initially. Third thing I want to show you real quick is if you come down here a little further, it's easy to miss because this is on the very eastern end of Euless. And one of the things we pointed out to them is they've actually got this label wrong. Areas is actually right here. But in the ultimate, again, not the inner, but in the ultimate, they're showing that to go away. And the comment that we're making there is Libra Lane here is designed to function with that. It's not designed as a cul-de-sac with, what's the radius these days, Chief? A large radius cul-de-sac. So if you simply took that away and left that as a street, we've got a concern about particularly emergency response equipment's ability to get there. So we're saying, hey, that's one of our reevaluate what you're doing there in the ultimate versus the interim. If I move to the north of the road, there's a little bit less of an effect for us. One of the things I want to point out here is this is the Riverwalk project. If they are going to make a comment and have asked the city to support that comment, and as it is right now, we would do that. Today, you can exit eastbound or westbound 183, and you can exit and come off right here. And this service road is two-way traffic, so you can turn right back and get back to their property. What TxDOT was indicating in the interim is that this became one-way traffic, westbound only. And so Riverwalk's point was you've effectively eliminated any access to our property short of going up 360 and doing some things. And I guess if you're have really good local knowledge, you can exit Main Street, go up Main Street, come down and do some things. But you've effectively eliminated access to their property. So what they talked to TxDOT at the meeting about, and again, TxDOT thought was a good idea, and the city would tend to support, is in the interim, not making this service road one-way, allowing it to be two-way from Fuller-Weiser back to the east, which provides access to their property. And from Fuller-Weiser to the west, it would be one-way, and that's because of, I can show you as we get closer to Main Street, how that has to function. One of the first questions you might say is, well, how do you do that? Well, it's through signage and through a specifically shaped median teardrop opening right there, and then as you took this exit, that's what you'd really be able to do, is to turn back that way. Now, in the ultimate, it will be one-way traffic, because in the ultimate, there is a flyover connection that allows you to reasonably get to that property, and the Riverwalk folks are comfortable with that. They're just saying, in this unknown interim between ultimate and interim construction, don't leave us where we can't access our property.
So the purple hash marks go away.
Purple hash mark is indicating, again, this is the ultimate schematic, that's indicating pavement going away.
So the interim, that exit will still be active.
In the interim, that exit's not. Let's see if I can do this a little bit, try to do something. Adam, move me down to Main Street. This thing's got issues. Yeah, that's good enough right there. So as we discussed earlier, Short Street in this location would go away, and we'd have sound wall placed in this area. 70 is Wendy's. It is a complete taking, and as you see, part of the roadway is actually in Wendy's. This portion of Fuller, East Fuller Drive, is intended to go away as part of that. 68 is Jack in the Box. It gets real interesting. The right-of-way take that they need for the widening of the Main Street to line the bridge back up is going to take out all of Jack in the Box's front parking, which is going to put them in violation of our parking ordinance. In addition, it's going to eliminate their access to Fuller Drive, since Fuller Drive will no longer be there. And that currently is how their fire lane is platted, to a joint driveway here coming down to Fuller. So what the city would be doing is, if your fire lane goes away, you've got to account for that somewhere. They can replat and rebuild a fire lane to circulate the building. The problem with that is, that's where their drive-through circulation is as well. So we don't believe there's enough space there to adequately serve fire lane circulation and drive-through. So I can't tell you what's going to happen to that property, but they've got some pretty good choices to be making there. That's one where TxDOT and Southgate will tell you that it is not a true taking, because they're not taking part of their building, but it's a functional taking. The property owner will most likely argue that the effect that you had on my property, I can no longer operate my business for the reasons that I just talked about. So what that leaves you is we believe that there's some opportunity for the market in that kind of general area there to do something differently. We will comment that they will verify that the control access now point here would remain open. That's what we would propose, instead of adjacent or striding the property line of these two properties, and that's as it should be. And we'll go slightly further to the west for me, please. That's good enough. So the gas station here at 66, the Starbucks at 65, and the Motel 6 at 64. There are two driveways on the gas station, one in this location and one shown here. Our comment there is going to be basically that they're closing one, and we're going to be talking about which one is most safe to close. You would say, well, maybe we leave this one open, but if you remember, there's West Fuller Drive right there, so you're trying to get some distance there. These two driveways, Starbucks will be a complete taking. This will take enough of their property to cut off their drive-through, and you can't have a Starbucks without a drive-through on a going to work corner. So I think there may be some opportunities where these properties kind of get recombined in some way, or potentially even these properties get recombined in some way. And so what you're going to see in general is not these adjacent driveways, that you'll probably see that combined to serve both properties. You may very well see this come before you as a new development with a replat, and you're platting two properties into one, and we can deal with the driveway access at that point in time. So again, the comment that takes out Southgate in that area is to look at that and work with the city to help facilitate whatever that new development is. When we know there's going to be a taking of a business in a building, then instead of just running out there and either putting a driveway or completely denying it, we're saying let's stop and look at the bigger picture to see what we need to do there. Motel 6 is going to, you can see by the blue line, lose some property. It does not get into their building. It does get into their fire lane. They cannot provide additional fire lane short of getting rid of a portion of the building. So I think you ought to look for something happening in that area. They're going to have to somehow accommodate the loss of that fire lane. It's going to provide some opportunity here too. And again, the city's not advocating here or anything, but I'm just speculating. If Motel 6 had to lop off part of their building, they might have some additional property that these guys might be interested in. Maybe there's a way for them to work together and they both benefit from that. In an instance like that, what you probably see is these two driveways go away and be combined into one driveway that serves both properties. Adam, flip back to the first drawing, if you will, and take us to Main Street. That's right there where it is. There's not a whole lot going on for the city to comment here on the north side as we come through the junior high. Again, the pedestrian sky bridge is going away.
Chris, can you back to the
Yes, sir.
we talked about some stuff in that area, what? So they're not gonna take away either parking here, they're gonna take away that little.
Yeah, they're working with the school to redo something here, which in my mind, what they're trying to do is kind of a parent drop-off / bus area. If you go in there today, when people are dropping off, they're parked on the service road, and it gets pretty tight. They're trying to get them off the service road and give them a place to pull into. And again, it's a little harder to see here because you're seeing this blue, which is the ultimate. In the nature of these drawings, I mean, you can't see down through the layers. But the school district is actively working with Southgate TxDOT to try to mitigate that issue that they have right now. So I think that's, I don't know exactly how it'll look, but it'll be better than it is today. 43B is an interesting lot. They're not showing any access. There's no access today, so that's why they're not showing any access. But we'll probably try to come up with some type of comment. In theory, you can access the property from this, but there's some question over how that was platted and dedicated and who controls that. That has always been an issue for the development of 43B. The other thing about 43B is it's hard to see here, but there's gas line easement, and there's some drainage easement. It is really diced up with some easement property. But we're going to be looking at that, and it's one of those where they're not showing any access, but then again, there is not a driveway access. They're not denying any access. So what they're showing is maintaining the status quo. Go back by the city property. They're again proposing to tie in the Spine Road and Shepherd Drive. There's a comment that we'll make here that they've already said is absolutely the case. We'll make the comment anyway, where this access point and this access point to Manchester will remain. Part of that had to do with, if you remember, the initial iteration was wiping out that whole front row of buildings because this right-of-way line was moving back considerably. And so I think at that point in time, the way they thought this would function was this would turn in and you'd have a central point. Because that's no longer the case and they're really having no effect to the Manchester property, there is a little right-of-way they're taking, but they're not getting into any buildings or parking or anything. These drives would be left open along with the middle drive. We did have a chance to visit with them about the sound wall in this area, and it's interesting what they said. We were talking particularly about the aesthetics and how that might look, and the answer that we had provided about the overall aesthetics package and the city's ability to direct our portion, if you will, within our city is absolutely correct, and that could be applied to the sound wall. But the other thing that they started to talk about was that the sound wall can be influenced by the owner of the property as to whether, even if it's required as part of the environmental clearance, if the owner does not want that, they could have some influence over that. In a typical residential area, they're not going to go in, this guy wants it, this guy doesn't, and have a patchwork sound wall. This is a unique situation because it's a residential property, but it's a single owner because it's a multifamily property. And so they will make that property owner aware of that. And they stopped short of saying that they had full control over whether it went in or not, but they indicated that they had a lot of influence as to how that would be done. Moving down past First Baptist Church and back to where we started, we're going to make a comment. They've showed no control access now, no driveway there today, so we're not really sure what that is. They show a no control access now point here. The city will ask that that remains open. This driveway off of 157 will be shut. This driveway off of 157 will not be. So this corner property will still have their 2 points of access, similar to the cool zone where we started over there. That you're going to eliminate some of the driveway points, but you're still giving the property owner access to the
Number 23's tanks are in the back, I
think you're right. I think their issue is that they actually don't. It gets real close as to whether it gets into their canopy mine. And I don't know if we've heard from that property owner kind of what his overall thought is. Sometimes a property owner, I mean, we've seen occasions where along the corridor where, even if it's not a full taking, they may decide to take whatever money the state gives them and move on down the road and do something else. And I don't know. I haven't had a discussion. That's actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but that's Mr. Huda that owns.
Exactly. We talked to him Thursday, and he's just not sure yet.
Okay. He owns actually 3 businesses affected by this. He owns up at Main Street, the 7-Eleven across from the Methodist Church, and is it the Chevron, I guess? They're just north of the Starbucks. So he's going to be well into this project.
What are our expectations of medians and how are those going to look? Do they carry monument signs with them? Do they kind of look like the medians in mid-cities and industrial? Or 157?
They get some of this studies package, which we have not even seen yet. Okay. And I think we would have some ability to direct that. And we're going to obviously want direction from you all. I will tell you, to remind you what we did in the NTE.
West Parkway?
Yeah, we directed, and it's probably a poor example because it's not done yet. It's still dirt and weeds there, but Ray and his group are working through with NTE NTE will actually be landscaping that per design that the Parks Department provided. And they built that Euless City Monument sign in that median per our specifications. The reason in that case that they built monument signs is because the 2 West Park monument signs on either side of the road were demolished as part of the freeway widening. So in essence, they owe the city a sign. We chose to go back with the newer city monument sign that we're doing. What we chose in NTE was to direct the aesthetics money, particularly landscaping, to the corridor. It wasn't much. I mean, basically the mid-cities, excuse me, the West Parkway intersection. Our really only choices would have been West Parkway or 157, and all this is going to get torn up as part of this project. So it made no sense to come down here and do any beautification to have it torn up a year later. So one option here is to, when we understand what the aesthetics package looks like, to direct them to focus that monies in our basically 157 and Main Street in those intersections. Or the other thing, and I'm just speculating because we haven't seen this aesthetic package, but back to what NTE was, it literally was almost a calculation. If you had X number of feet of frontage, you got so many shrubs and so many trees, and it got to the point where it was a little silly that you were going to have the one tree dotted in front of each piece, and in many cases the business owners didn't want the one tree because they're going to have to mow around. So that was the decision to consolidate that into more of a focal point at an intersection.
Any other questions for Chris on this topic?
You're about 45 minutes right on.
Good job. I almost get it. So, but there are no more questions. questions on that, Chris and Mike will be preparing those comments and be getting those ready to send out next week and or later this